Why is it that some people seem to have a knack for convincing others? What makes their words so compelling? Their arguments so persuasive? Is it some kind of hidden talent? Well, it might look like that, but there's more to it than meets the eye. Think about this for a moment. Have you ever agreed to something almost without realizing it? Maybe a friend convinced you to join them on a last-minute trip, or a coworker persuaded you to handle a task you weren't keen on. It happens to all of us, and it's not by chance. You see, our brains are hardwired to respond to certain triggers in conversation. We're social creatures after all. Whether it's through body language, tone of voice, or how information is presented, we're constantly influenced by the subtleties around us. Often, these influences happen on a level we're not even fully aware of. But here's where it gets fascinating. Understanding these psychological triggers isn't just about recognizing them in others. It's also about learning to use them effectively and ethically in your own interactions. It's not about manipulation. It's about enhancing communication and connection. Imagine being able to subtly guide conversations, create stronger bonds, and make your ideas more compelling, all while ensuring everyone feels respected. If you're intrigued by how these principles work and want to see them in action, you're in the right place. Let's dive into 10 powerful psychology tips that can help you influence and persuade others. Ready to unlock the secrets? Let's get started. Tip number 1, the contrast principle. Have you ever noticed that a $50 shirt seems cheap after looking at a $300 jacket? That's the contrast principle in action. It's like going to a restaurant and seeing a $100 steak on the menu. Suddenly, the $30 chicken doesn't seem so bad, right? When you present an extreme version of what you want first, the actual request will seem more reasonable in comparison. This doesn't mean tricking people, but rather giving them a clear perspective. Let's break this down with a simple scenario. Say you're haggling at a flea market. You really want that vintage lamp. So you ask the seller, "What's the price on this?" The seller says, $150. Now, you were ready to offer $100. But after hearing $150, even $120 seems like a steal. The trick? That initial high price anchored your expectations. So when the seller drops to $120, you're more likely to accept, even though you might have gotten it for $100 if you'd played hardball. Sneaky? Maybe a little effective? Absolutely. But remember, honesty is crucial. Start with an ambitious yet realistic figure. For instance, if you're negotiating a salary, suggest a number slightly higher than what you expect. Then, when you present the figure you actually want, it seems much more agreeable. Or when planning a project timeline, propose a challenging deadline first. The realistic deadline that follows will seem like a breeze by comparison. Of course, this principle works best when the extremes are plausible. Go too far off the mark and you might come across as insincere, which can backfire. Nobody wants to feel like they're being played, right? Now, on to tip number 2, inoculation theory. Now, this one might sound like it belongs in a doctor's office, but it's actually a clever way to make your arguments more robust. Imagine you're debating a friend who loves pineapple on pizza. You could say, "I get that pineapple adds a sweet twist, but have you considered how it changes the texture?" This plants a tiny seed of doubt. By mentioning a small counter-argument, you make your overall position stronger. The person feels like they've already considered objections, making them less likely to be swayed by others later. Let's think of it like this. You're a lawyer in a courtroom. You know the opposing side is going to bring up that one flaw in your case. So what do? You mention it first. Sure, there's this one issue, but it's minor compared to the bigger picture. By doing this, you take the sting out of their argument before they even get to it. Clever, right? And this doesn't just work in courtrooms. It's super effective in everyday situations too. Presenting a business proposal? Start by acknowledging a potential drawback, then quickly explain why it's not a deal breaker. Maybe you're pitching a new idea at work, and you know it requires more upfront investment. You could say, "I understand this might seem costly at first, but here's why it's worth it in the long run." This way, you've already addressed their concerns before they've even voiced them. The beauty of inoculation theory is that it shows you're thinking ahead. It says, "I'm aware of the potential issues, but I've already got them covered." This builds trust and makes your argument much more persuasive. And now, let's move to tip number 3, the illusion of choice. Picture this. You ask a child if they want broccoli or carrots for dinner. Notice how they didn't choose cake? That's the illusion of choice at work. Giving people options where both outcomes benefit you lets them feel in control, while you still get the desired result. It's a bit like magic, but with less sleight of hand and more psychology. Let's say you're managing a team and you need someone to take on an extra project. Instead of asking, "Would you like to take on this project?" to which they could easily say no. You could ask, "Would you prefer to handle the project this week or next?" Either way, the project gets done and they feel like they had a say in the matter. The key here is to make sure the choices are genuine and not manipulative. People are smart. They'll catch on if the options are too narrow or forced. So, provide real options that lead to mutually beneficial outcomes. For instance, when scheduling a meeting, ask, "Would you prefer a morning or afternoon slot?" Or, "Should we focus on this or that issue first?" You're guiding the conversation, but allowing them to steer the ship. It's a win-win. And let's face it, everyone likes to feel like they're in control of their decisions. It's a fundamental part of human nature. So by offering choices, you're not only getting what you need, but you're also respecting their autonomy. That's a recipe for success in any negotiation or discussion. Next up is tip number 4, the power of silence. Have you ever been in a conversation where the silence becomes so awkward that you just start talking to fill it? That's the power of silence. After making a request or presenting an idea, stay quiet. The other person often feels compelled to speak, and in that silence, they might just agree with you. Here's a fun way to think about it. Silence is like a pause button in a conversation, but it's also a play button for someone else's thoughts. When you go silent after making your point, it's like handing the microphone to the other person. And guess what? They'll usually pick it up and start talking, sometimes even talking themselves into agreeing with you. Imagine you're in a negotiation. You've made your offer, and now there's that deafening silence. It feels like it lasts forever, right? Resist the urge to fill it. Stay calm, maintain eye contact, and let the silence do the work. More often than not, the other person will start talking to break the tension, and that's where you'll find your opportunity. This technique is particularly effective in situations where you need to gauge someone's true feelings, or when you're waiting for a decision. Silence gives them the space to think. And in many cases, they'll come around to your way of thinking just to fill the void. So what's next? Tip number 5, pacing and leading. Imagine you're at a dance. You start by matching your partner's moves, then gradually guide them into new steps. Pacing and leading works the same way in conversations. Start by matching the person's mood, tone, and body language, then slowly shift towards where you want the conversation to go. Let's break it down. Say your friend is really upset about something. They're talking quickly, their voice is tense, and they're pacing around the room. Instead of trying to calm them down immediately, you match their pace. Talk a little quicker, let your voice mirror theirs, and stand up with them. This is pacing. It shows you're in sync with them, that you understand where they're at emotionally. Once you've established that connection, you can begin leading. Gradually slow your speech, soften your tone, and sit down. You'll notice that, more often than not, they'll start to follow your lead without even realizing it. It's like a subtle dance where you're guiding them to a calmer, more rational place. This technique is all about empathy and rapport. People are more likely to follow your lead if they feel that you're genuinely in tune with them. Once they feel understood, you can gently guide the conversation in the direction you want it to go. Let's continue with tip number 6, the Zeigarnik Effect. Ever have that nagging feeling when something is left unfinished? That's the Zeigarnik Effect. People naturally want to complete what's been started. It's the reason why cliffhangers in TV shows drive us crazy. We just have to know what happens next. This psychological phenomenon can be incredibly useful in keeping people engaged and motivated. For instance, if you're giving a presentation, leave some things slightly unfinished or hint that there's more to come. It's like watching a great movie trailer. You see just enough to get hooked, and now you can't wait to watch the full movie. Here's a practical example. Imagine you're teaching a class and you present a problem without immediately giving the solution. Instead, you say, "We'll come back to this later," and move on. Students will naturally keep thinking about the problem, trying to solve it in their minds. It keeps them engaged because their brains want to complete the task. This effect is also useful in negotiations or sales. You could say, "There's one more benefit to this product that I'll reveal in just a moment. But first," this keeps the other person hanging on to your every word, eager to find out what comes next. It's a technique that can turn a good conversation into a great one by keeping the other person mentally invested. Just be sure to follow through and provide the answers or closure they're waiting for. Otherwise, it can lead to frustration rather than persuasion. Now, let's jump to tip number 7, priming. Ever hear a song that gets stuck in your head, influencing your mood all day? That's priming. Subtly introducing ideas beforehand can influence someone's decisions later. For example, if you're about to pitch an idea, casually mention a success story or a positive outcome earlier in the conversation. It sets the stage for them to associate your proposal with success. Think of it as planting seeds in someone's mind. If you're trying to get a friend to go on a trip, you might start by talking about the amazing vacation you had last year. By the time you bring up your actual plan, they're already in a positive mindset, more open to the idea of traveling. Priming can be subtle and doesn't have to be obvious. Let's say you're about to ask your boss for a raise. Before the meeting, you might share some positive news about company profits or mention a project that's gone really well. By the time you bring up your raise, your boss is already thinking in terms of success and growth, which can make them more receptive to your request. It's a simple yet powerful technique that works because our brains are constantly making connections between things. By introducing a positive idea or outcome before making your actual request, you're priming the other person to see your proposal in a more favorable light. We're almost there. Tip number 8, the foot in the mouth technique. This one sounds funny, right? But it's actually quite simple. By asking someone how they feel or getting them to verbalize their positive emotions first, they're more likely to agree with your request afterward. It's all about consistency. Once someone states they're feeling good, they want to act in ways that align with that feeling. Here's how you can use it. Start a conversation with a simple, "How's your day going?" If they respond positively, follow up with your request. "That's great to hear. Could you help me out with something?" This technique works because people like to stay consistent with their previous statements. If they've just said they're having a good day, they're more likely to continue in that positive vein by agreeing to your request. It's like setting the stage for a yes before you even ask the question. By getting someone to express positive feelings up front, you're making it more likely that they'll want to maintain those positive vibes by agreeing with you. Just remember to be genuine. No one likes being manipulated into doing something. And now, on to tip number 9, labeling. Let's say you tell someone, "You're really good at keeping things organized." Now they'll want to live up to that label. Labeling assigns a positive trait that aligns with your request. It's like giving them a role to play, and people like to be consistent with the labels they accept about themselves. This works because people generally want to act in ways that are consistent with their self-image. If you tell someone they're a great leader, they're more likely to take charge in situations because they want to live up to that expectation. So, how can you use this? Let's say you're working on a group project, and you need someone to take the lead on a particular task. You might say, "You're so good at organizing things. Could you handle this part of the project?" Or if you're trying to encourage a friend to try something new, you could say, "You've always been so adventurous, I bet you'd love this." By labeling them in a positive way, you're nudging them to behave in a manner that aligns with that label. And the best part, it often works without the person even realizing it. They just naturally start acting in ways that are consistent with the positive labels you've assigned to them. It's a subtle but effective way to encourage the behavior you want to see. Finally, let's wrap it up with tip number 10. Build genuine connections. People are more inclined to listen and be persuaded when they feel a real, authentic connection. It's not just about what you want, but about truly understanding and caring for the other person. This isn't just a tactic, it's a way of life. If you want to be more persuasive, focus on building strong, authentic relationships. When people feel that you genuinely care about their well-being and interests, they're much more likely to listen to your ideas and be influenced by them. Here's how to do it. Start by actively listening. When someone is speaking, really pay attention to what they're saying instead of thinking about your next response. Ask questions that show you're interested in their perspective. Offer help or support when you can, even if it doesn't directly benefit you. Over time, these small actions build trust and respect, which are the foundation of any strong relationship. And here's the magic. When you have that genuine connection, persuasion becomes almost effortless. You're not just convincing someone to do something, you're collaborating with them to find a solution that benefits both of you. It's a win-win situation that leaves everyone feeling good. So there you have it, 10 powerful psychology tips that can help you become more persuasive in a way that's both effective and ethical. Remember, these techniques are tools to be used with care and respect. The goal is to create positive outcomes for everyone involved, not to manipulate or deceive. If you enjoyed these tips, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Let's hear from you. What's your favorite persuasion tip? Or maybe you have your own to share? Drop it in the comments below. Thanks for watching and see you in the next video.